Hello everybody. In this video we're going to talk a little bit about selection games. And at their root, a selection game is essentially you have a pool of players or pool of options, and out of that pool you need to select a certain number of them. So these differ from the sequencing games, where the sequencing games we have to use all the pieces and we have to figure out how to arrange them in a certain order so that we don't break any rules. In this one, we're still going to have rules about what we can choose, but we're just supposed to choose a certain number out of a certain set. So let's look at this for a second. And we know it's going to be a selection game because, well, frankly, they use the word choose from right there, but it says Alicia will take exactly 4 courses and she must choose from these following 7 courses. PRS, okay, but here's a little trap here. S, it says, which is offered twice, once on each on Tuesdays at 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. So technically, we kind of have 8 courses here, right? We have stats at 9 and stats at 3, and then W, world history. No one is allowed to take any course more than once, and then here's the restrictions. Okay, so let's just first write down our courses, the players, the pieces that we have to choose from. So it looks like it's G, J, M, G, J, M, P, R, and the way I would separate because we have 2 statistics courses, I would put S9 to represent the 9 a.m. one, and S3, and then world history, W. Okay? Now, typically with a selection game, what you do is you would make kind of your list of the ins and the outs. I wouldn't overstress this too much, but this is generally how I like to do it. I make a little thing like this, and in this case we have a total of 8 pieces, and we have to choose 4 of them. So that means there have to be 4 slots on the inside, and there have to be 4 on the out. Okay? And we're just going to look at what the rules state and what we can deduce from this. So let's look at the rules. Oh, very quickly, I'm going to call it Rule A before even jumping into these rules. They didn't explicitly state this, but we can look at this, right? We know that we're not allowed to take any course more than once, so that means we can say that since stats is offered in 2 different manners, if I take stats 9, then I can't take stats 3. And if you remember from our formal logic, we write that something like this. If I do stats 9, I cannot do stats 3. Right? And vice versa. If I do stats 3, I cannot do stats 9. Now, what that tells us is that at least one of those has to be in the out. They might both be in the out. Maybe she doesn't take statistics at all. But we do know that if there is an in of any stats, the opposite one has to be on the out. Right? Pause the video if that confused you. But so what I would do for the out here is I'd say I know for a fact that at least one of those stat courses has to be out. You cannot possibly take both of them. It would break this condition here that you can't take any course more than once. Okay, so that would be our first sort of basic rule there. So let's look through the other ones here. It says you must take Japanese if you do not take Russian. So this is getting us into those if-then statements involved with formal logic. If I do not take Russian, so this would be the way that we would write this. If we don't take Russian, do that little squiggle, say no, not taking it, that means you have to take Japanese. Okay, so there's our statement. But very importantly, on the LSAT, you want to be comfortable with contrapositives. If anybody's confused about contrapositives, you send me a note, and I'll, put up or a comment or whatever, and I'll do a video on that. But it's basically, if you have a flow, you have the arrow, you just take the other term, you switch the terms first, so I'll put J leads to R, and then switch the signs. So in this case, we had positive J, so now make that negative J, and in this case we started with a negative R, make that positive R. So the flip side of this statement, the logical corollary to this is if not R then J is if not J, then must be R. All right? So there's our rule there. Let's see, rule number 2, cannot take Japanese if macro. So if macro, then not Japanese. Converse, positive J means if I am taking Japanese, then must mean that I'm not taking macro. So number 3, not world history if stats at 9. So if stats 9, then not W. Converse, if I am taking W, world history, then I'm not taking stats 9. Okay, and then the last one is, oh wait, not the last one. You must take stats at 9 if you take psychology. So if P, then S9. The converse of that is if not S9, then not P. And rule number 5. Must take either geography or world history, but can't take both. This is a little bit tricky to write in formal logic. So you can do something like G or W. No, I don't know how best to write this. Not GW. So let's just translate what this means. So if I have to take one of these things, but I can't take both, that tells me a little bit more about my ins and outs. There must be, in my the courses that I am taking, there must be a G or a W in there. But then that also means, since I can't take both, I also know something about my outs. I cannot have both of them. So if I have G, then W's out. If I have W, then G is out. You can make a few more deductions to fill in your ins and outs with this little sketch here, but I wouldn't worry about it so much. That's pretty much all that you need in order to answer these questions. All right, so I'm going to pause the video right there, and then in the next one, we'll look at the questions, starting with the one that I goofed up on in class. All right.